Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome to another video. Today we're checking out a brand new Socket 478 cooler from eBay. They sell for around $6 to $10, so fairly cheap. We will check out the performance, see if the rated specifications check out, if the processor throttles in games, and CPU stress tests. So without further ado, enjoy this video. So let's go over the parts that we're going to use in this project. We've got the 8-bit C7 motherboard. Thank you to Darren from our Facebook group. He donated this to the YouTube channel. We got an optical drive, solid state hard drive. We've got an XFX power supply. The cooler, of course, that we're reviewing. We've got a gig of RAM. The chipset cooler is a bit wonky. If you got any suggestions for replacement, do let me know. We're using a wireless USB driven keyboard, wireless keyboard with a touchpad, wipes for cleaning the thermal grease. The processor is a 3 GHz Northwood with hyperthreading 800 MHz FSB. And we're also using a graphics card. This one is supplied by Electromine. There will be a video review later at a stage. And they also hooked me up with some thermal paste, so we're going to use this in the video. So this is just a good opportunity for me to test if the video card works. We've got a speaker here for the audio, 17-inch monitor, and we're good to go. So let's take a closer look at the cooler. It's got a Cooler Master label on there, but I'm not 100% convinced if this is really authentic Cooler Master or just a Chinese knockoff. In terms of specifications, there are some details over here. It's rated up to 3 GHz, and that's why I used a 3 GHz processor. Fan should run around 3000 RPM. So let's open the box and have a look what this cooler looks like. This is one of these coolers that mount with some brackets from the top. So I'm not a big fan of the Intel stock coolers. Let me just put that back on. They're pretty hard to remove. I much prefer this method here with the brackets from the top. So this is what the cooler looks like. So yeah, there's not much surface area. There are lots of gaps between the things. You want to have a lot of things and very thin to increase the surface area. But the cooler seems fairly decent, that's for sure. The cooler is mounted. It's got some clips here, so that should be removable if we can just get it off. And you should be able to mount any other fan on there. So that is quite neat. If the fan dies, or if you don't like the RPM, how many RPM it's got, or it's too noisy, you can just put on another fan. I will measure the size of the fan and then just put it as an overlay. It comes with some pre-applied thermal grease, but yeah, I'm definitely going to wipe that out, and we're going to use this thermal grease here. I haven't used this before, but it should do the trick for this Pentium 4 just fine. I just noticed that this thing here is actually broken off. I'm not sure if that was me when I removed the fan, but it's not going to be a big deal. I might just glue that with some super glue later on, but it's going to be sturdy enough to still do our test. So I'm just going to put in the cooler. I still need to wipe the grease off that one as well, but that shouldn't take me too long. That goes off fairly easy. Okay, there we go. So I'm just going to let that dry a little bit, and then we're going to put on the thermal grease and install the cooler. Alrighty, here we go. So I'm just going to put in a fairly small blob in the center of the processor, and that's all we need. There you go. Let me just secure that, and then we're going to install the cooler. So it just goes this way around. We just going to put it on top. And then we're going to use these brackets, so they just fasten into here. There you go, that's all installed, good to go. And here we can see the cooler from another perspective. So the part at the top is a little bit loose, but the cooler itself is fairly sturdy. Okay, that's all up and running. In terms of noise, the chipset cooler definitely makes quite a racket, but the CPU cooler is fairly quiet, and we've also got the 2 fans running on the GPU. So in terms of fan noise for that CPU cooler, it's not too bad. It does vibrate a little bit, but that's because the bracket is broken. So right now it's actually really, yeah, that's fine. That's not overbearing at all. So I would be really happy with that sort of noise level. So I'm just going to install Windows XP quickly, some tools, and then we will stress test the processor cooler and see if it's up to scratch to cooler 3 GHz Pentium 4. Okay guys, here we go. We just installed Windows XP and I installed a few tools in the game. So here we are in CPU Z, Intel Pentium 4, Northwood running at 3 GHz, 1 core and hyper-threading. Here we can see the motherboard with the 875 chipset. We've got a gig of RAM, and here's the graphics card, a GeForce 4Ti 4600. So I'm using hardware info to do all the monitoring. I've got MSI Afterburner running with the River Tuner Statistics server. However, that doesn't display the CPU temperature correct, so I'm using hardware info in that sense, the CPU reading to River Tuner basically. So at the moment we are at 46.5 degrees, so we're just gonna launch a game and we should get a nice overlay. Should be the CPU temperature. The other stats are not that interesting. I basically enabled most of the settings that were available, so we're just gonna go into the game and see what temperature we're getting. So we're getting at the moment 60 degrees. Yeah, we can see here the CPU load of the 2 cores. So overall the CPU load is around 50%. So in games the CPU is usually not stressed that much. So first I'm gonna show you my method of testing CPU coolers in games, and then we're gonna have a look at using CPU Z stress test. Yeah. Okay, I just quickly exited out because I forgot to add the clock speed. So the problem with the CPU on socket 478 is there's no real indicator for when the CPU is throttling. So to demonstrate, I'm just going to unplug the CPU fan and we're going to see what happens. So on a modern machine, as the temperature will climb up, you should see the clock speed actually going down. But something interesting happens with this one. So keep track of the frame rate. We're getting at the moment 91 FPS. And the way the Pentium 4 on the socket 478 behaves is it won't reduce the clock speed. It will slow down in terms of performance. It will basically just take a break. The temperatures will go down and then it'll start running again. And then it'll overheat, and then it'll take a break again. Now, those breaks, we can't really see or measure them, but we can definitely notice them in the performance. So it's now starting to dip under 90, so we're going 88. We're getting 85 degrees at the moment. So now the BIOS alarm goes off. It tells us that the temperature is too hot, but we're just gonna let it run a little bit more. So we're now down to 70 FPS, so the machine keeps slowing down the performance to basically protect itself. And if you run it long enough, the machine will eventually shut down. So we're down to 50 FPS. I'm gonna plug the fan back in, and we're gonna see how long it takes for the temperatures to stabilize themselves. So we can see that the performance is now slowly creeping up again, so 83, 87. The temperature is also starting to go down a little bit, and the alarm should stop very soon. I'm not sure where exactly the threshold is, but this is a good test for a CPU cooler, not just being able to, hold the temperature, but also to lower the temperature from a higher one. So performance is now back up to where it was before, around 90 degrees, and the BIOS alarm should also switch off any moment, so we're just gonna wait a little bit more. There you go, so the BIOS alarm turned off. We're now down to 79 degrees. And performance is now back up to standard. So that's looking very good for gaming. So at the moment I would say the processor can definitely handle a 3 GHz Pentium 4 with quite a comfortable buffer in terms of performance. However, the CPU load was only around 50%, so I'm going to get out of the game, let the machine run for a while to give the process a bit of time to cool down, and then we're going to do a purely CPU stress test without involving the graphics card in a game. Okay, so now we're going to use CPU set to increase the temperature. There's one issue with this program. It takes over the operating system in a way. The temperatures of the processor, they just don't update, and the system becomes very unresponsive. However, it heats up the processor, and that's all we want to do. So once again, I'm going to unplug the fan, and we can see the performance live. So we're getting around 38, 39. That's just a score for the processor. And we're just going to let it run, let the temperatures rise, and the performance should go down. And around 85 degrees, the BIOS alarm should start kicking in. At least that's if that's correct. If my memory is correct. And yeah, so I'm just going to wait and see what happens and how long this takes to heat up. Okay, so we can see some movement with the performance. It dipped under 38 and it's now slowly going down and down. So we're just going to wait until the BIOS alarm kicks in. There we go. So the BIOS alarm just kicked in. So we are around 85 or between 85 and 90 degrees. So I'm just going to plug in the fan again to give the processor a bit of cooling in. We can see that the performance is now way down, 28. Let's see if it dips under 28. Alrighty, so we're just gonna let this run and see if the if the cooler can stabilize the temperatures and if it's able to get the performance back up to the standard levels. So the BIOS alarm has just turned off and the performance is once again slowly creeping up. So hopefully the cooler is able to get the processor temperature low enough for the standard performance to be back. So the performance is slowly creeping up again, but it's a very slow progress, 31.2, and it's been cooling the processor for 2 or 3 minutes already. So it's definitely having a hard time cooling this processor and getting the performance back up to where it was before. So it's been around 10 minutes, I would say, and the performance is back up to 34, but that is still not at the full speed. So it seems that the processor is struggling getting the temperature under control. So I'm gonna stop the stress test and we're gonna have a look at what the temperature is like. It says 73 degrees here. I'm just gonna let it cool down, and then I'm gonna do one final test where I'm just gonna run it under stress for like an hour or so and see if the performance dips. So off we go. Around 38, 39 is the current benchmark result. So we're just going to let it run for an hour and see if the processor throttles. So it's only been 20 minutes, but we can clearly see that the performance has dropped, not by a massive amount, but it has dropped regardless. So guys, we've seen enough, so let's wrap up this video and draw a conclusion. Okay guys, time for conclusion. Is this processor cooler worth getting? So looking at the rated specifications, it certainly is not capable of cooling a 3 GHz Pentium 4 sufficiently. Yes, in games, if the CPU load is not too high, it can keep the processor from throttling, but 70 degrees, that's just too high to really say that this does a decent job. And you've seen the results when running something that's purely CPU bound. It can't handle the processor and the CPU throttles. So I see these more suitable for 2.4, 2.6, maybe a 2.8 GHz Pentium 4. 3 GHz is definitely too optimistic, and we did use a Northwood core, so if you're using one of the Prescott processors, it will be even worse. Now, despite the rating being too optimistic, if you're using a Pentium 2.4 or 2.6 GHz, for example, I can still recommend this cooler. Firstly, because it is very cheap, between $6 and $10, and this is brand new, and there are no alternatives. Really, no one makes coolers for socket 478 anymore. So that alone is definitely worth going for. It's also super easy to install with the clips at the top. I prefer those over the traditional Intel boxed coolers. So basically, if we summarize it in one sentence, it's not quite up to spec what it says on the box, but considering it's such a cheap price, it is cheap, user replaceable fan, I still can recommend this cooler if you find it on eBay. And that's it for this video, guys. Thank you so much for watching. As always, please subscribe if you haven't done so, hit the like or the dislike button, share the video, and leave me a comment down below. What do you think of this cooler? What do you use for socket 478 cooling? And have you used this cooler before? Maybe you already own it, and how do you find it? That's it. See you soon with another video. And if you know of a good and hopefully cheap replacement for Northbridge coolers on these motherboards, also let me know down below in the comments.